A lost jewel in the Arabian desert. Petra is one of the world's most mysterious ancient cities. Towering over its entrance is an engineering masterpiece, the Khazneh. Immortalized by Hollywood films, Petra's most elaborate structure was built directly into solid rock nearly 20 centuries ago. Now discoveries are unearthing the startling engineering behind the Khazneh and the lost desert people who built it. How was this magnificent building constructed? Who could have achieved such an incredible feat? And the biggest question of all, what was it for? Every year in the arid landscape of Jordan's southern desert, over 500,000 tourists trek through a narrow gorge over 1 kilometer long that penetrates deep into the barren, rocky terrain. They are retracing the route of intrepid Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, who in 1812 came here chasing rumors of an ancient lost city. The narrow, twisting fissure winds its way through high cliffs, yielding tantalizing glimpses of a structure up ahead. Nothing prepares the visitor for what lies beyond the final bend, Petra's most magnificent feature, the Khazneh. This ancient building stands 39 meters high. Its grand columned entrance towers over visitors who come to wonder at its delicate carvings and dramatic sculptures. Built into the red sandstone, the Khazneh's cavernous inner chambers reach deep into the heart of the cliff. It guards the gateway into the 2,000-year-old city of Petra. Beyond the Khazneh, the narrow canyon opens out into a wide basin. Here the landscape is littered with the ruins of a lost civilization. A temple, an amphitheater, dozens of tombs. Only traces remain of what was once the ancient capital city that the old manuscripts call Petra, the Greek word for stone. The greatest surviving structure in Petra is the Khazneh.
None of the other buildings, the facades that you have in Petra, have the perfection of the Khazneh.
Lecturer Nicole Douek is fascinated by the Khazneh.
Whoever thought it out thought it through very, very well. And what they achieved there is absolutely spectacular.
The Khazneh is Petra's finest construction. A sophisticated piece of engineering on a scale that rivals anything in the ancient world. For nearly 200 years, experts have been battling to understand the engineering genius behind its construction. Over the centuries, theories have been constantly disproved and altered. Nobody knew who built the Khazneh or what it was for. The sheer logistics of building such a monument in a bleak, barren desert seemed impossible. To have any hope of finding answers, experts first have to solve an even bigger mystery. Who built the Khazneh? In the 19th century, the only clue historians had was the name the local Bedouin tribes gave it, Khaznet Faroun, or Pharaoh's Treasury.
It's called in Arabic, Khaznet Faroun, that's a full name. This literally means the treasury of Pharaoh.
Jordanian archaeologist Dr. Harriet Amir is trying to unlock the Khazneh's secrets. The Bedouin believed that the Khazneh was an ancient Egyptian treasure vault. But modern experts have discovered clues that prove the ancient Egyptians did not build it. They were able to identify its distinctive architecture.
There are many Hellenistic features, Greek features here. The broken pediment at the top, the thalos, which is drum-like structure in the middle, the pediment on top of the entrance, having the columns in front.
Some of the features reflect the late Hellenistic style, found throughout the Roman Empire in cities like Alexandria to the west of Petra. From this, experts calculated that the Khazneh may have been built sometime around 80 BC, nearly 1,000 years after the glory days of ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians did not build the Khazneh. There is another theory. Clues lie in 2,000-year-old Greco-Roman manuscripts. They speak of Petra, the magnificent city in the desert, and describe it as the home of the Nabataeans.
The Nabataeans were nomadic tribes originally who came from the Arabian Peninsula. They became well known for their trading activities and their control over the trade routes.
The Nabataeans dominated the trade in incense and spice, running camel caravans across the Arabian desert.
Think of a caravan not of 5 camels. You must think of a few hundred camels, if not thousands. The hub of all this was this capital city that they built, which is Petra.
Petra was perfectly positioned at the point where several of the ancient world's most important trade routes intersected. From here, the Nabataeans could trade with the Romans and Greeks to the west, the Persians to the east, running caravans from Arabia to the Mediterranean Sea. The trade made them wealthy and powerful.
The reputation of the Nabataeans is that they are the richest of the rich. It's megabucks, it's nouveau riche.
Historians knew the Nabataeans were ruled by dynastic kings, and by the 1st century BC had settled communities in the area. But no one had suspected the Nabataeans were master builders, capable of creating a city like Petra, and the masterpiece that is the Khazneh.
They disappeared off the face of the earth for hundreds of years.
Little of Petra has survived for modern researchers to investigate. However, groundbreaking new work is starting to unearth the secrets of Nabataean engineering.
The archaeology is producing extraordinary results.
Using these results, the mysteries of the Khazneh can be unlocked, revealing the secret of its dark purpose and the great man behind its construction. But one question needs answering first. How did the Nabataeans engineer a megastructure like the Khazneh in the middle of the desert? Petra is one of the ancient world's most beautiful cities, and the Khazneh is its crowning glory. Experts now know the Nabataeans were behind its creation, but this discovery provokes an even bigger riddle. How a group of nomadic traders were able to construct such an engineering masterpiece. This achievement appears even more astonishing when examples of early Nabataean architecture are taken into account.
The early Nabataean tombs are what you can see here behind us. And you can see they're pretty plain.
These basic rock-cut tombs are dominated by a simple design called the crow step, which looks like 2 staircases leading in opposite directions.
The crow step seems to have been all along the most typical type of Nabataean facade.
But the Khazneh is in a totally different league.
What the Nabataeans achieve here is different and probably more impressive than anywhere else.
The challenge facing the builders was enormous. experts wanted to work out how they could scale the near vertical cliff to the height of the Khazneh, 39 meters. One researcher is re-examining the clues.
We have 2 rows of square slots in each side of the cliff.
Dr. Shaher Rababa, a leading expert on how Petra was built, is focusing on a set of slots to the sides of the Khazneh. Some experts believe that these slots held scaffolding poles. But in Petra's rocky wilderness, trees are in short supply. Scaffolding over 39 meters high would take a forest full of timber. Dr. Rababa is convinced the Nabataeans wouldn't have relied on such a rare commodity. He investigates further. He finds that the holes are not entirely square. They are in fact deeper at the base than they are at the top.
The configuration of this depth cannot take a wooden beam. I don't think that they were used as scaffolding.
Dr. Rababa has a theory.
I think they were used as footholds like a ladder.
He believes that these footholds were carved long after the Khazneh was constructed, perhaps during the medieval period when the sculptures of living things were deemed offensive. This may have been when Vandals beheaded and defaced the figures on the Khazneh. Whether medieval or not, Dr. Rababa believes the square slots had nothing to do with the construction of the Khazneh. So now, Rababa wants to find out how the Nabataeans did access the structure. He finds his answer and more at a tomb they had left unfinished.
We are now in front of the unfinished tomb. It is really a very important structure.
This unfinished tomb unlocks the secrets of the Khazneh's construction.
It brings the evidence to say that the Nabataeans didn't use wooden scaffolding. Instead, they used natural platform.
The evidence reveals that the builders carved a natural platform out of the rock. They used this platform as a ledge on which to stand and work. What's more, this discovery indicates a revolutionary approach to construction. The Nabataeans turned building techniques on their head.
The main difference between the freestanding buildings and the rock-cut monuments is the starting point. In the freestanding buildings, we start from the foundation, but in rock-cut, we started from the top to bottom.
The building was not constructed in the traditional fashion from the ground up. It was carved out of the rock from the top down. This meant the builders had to start at a height of 39 meters. They had planned the Khazneh's location carefully. Natural contours in the cliff formed a narrow route to the top of their building site. The climb must have been precarious. In fact, a simple solution may have eased their way: stairs cut into the rock. Many of these carved staircases can still be seen in the surrounding cliffs leading up to the Khazneh. Having gained access to their construction site, the hard work could begin. The entire job was completed in 2 stages. First, the heavy work of hacking back the uneven surface of the cliff. Starting at the top of the Khazneh, the Nabataeans tunneled along the rock face to create the first working platform or ledge. From here, they worked downwards, quarrying away the rough cliff face to create a smooth, flat working surface. All over the Khazneh, Dr. Rababa has identified scars in the rock. These reveal the simple handheld tools required for each stage of its construction. Large gouged scars indicate most of this work was achieved using pickaxes. It must have taken them months to quarry out this rock. When the Nabataeans reached the bottom, their blank canvas was ready to be carved. The second stage could begin. The builders climbed back up to the top, cut another ledge, and began to painstakingly carve the decorative facade. Every cut had to be perfect. If the builders made a mistake, they couldn't climb back to repair it. The Nabataeans' hand tools were only made from crude iron, but they were skillfully used to shape Petra's soft sandstone. As they worked their way down the cliff, the builders started to reveal the finished structure. It was like dropping a vast stone curtain to unveil the masterpiece behind. But their ingenuity did not end there. The way in which these desert builders dealt with the huge quantities of debris was brilliantly resourceful. Clues from around Petra reveal the secret of the construction site's dual purpose. The unwanted rock was removed in great blocks of stone. Trenches were cut into the ledge in a grid pattern, leaving squares of rock exposed in the middle. These individual squares were then levered and split off their rocky base, using natural cleavage points in the sandstone. Rather than waste energy in lowering the blocks, the Nabataeans simply pushed them off the ledge. These great lumps of stone were hauled away to become the building blocks for freestanding structures nearby. The Khazneh was both a construction site and a quarry. However, this top-down construction technique did not come without a price. There was no margin for error. With a freestanding building, workers can make sure the walls and columns are strong enough before adding the weight of the upper sections on top. With the top-down technique, the upper sections are finished first. If the weight of the upper sections becomes too heavy, the entire structure could collapse on top of the workers below.
The front of this building is rather surprising.
Ed McCann is a civil engineer and has been examining the structural forces within the Khazneh.
When you turn the thing round to the side, you realise that what this is effectively a carving into the cliff. And so when we start talking about it as a structure and how does it work as a structure, it's very, very different to a building in the conventional sense.
The whole of the Khazneh is carved from a single piece of rock. However, there is one place which could still be at risk, the portico or entranceway that dominates the lower section. Hundreds of tons of rock are suspended over this vast entrance space. The solution is a massive stone lintel which spans the width of the building and bears this weight. It sits on top of 6 columns. But even the columns are carved out of the cliff. While the outer 4 are left embedded in the rock face, the central 2 columns are freestanding. It appears as if these 2 columns take most of the weight. If this is the case, then the columns had to be carved absolutely straight to bear the weight of the lintel above. A big risk. But the Nabataeans knew how to avoid it.
When we look at that structure, which looks like it is a lintel with columns supporting it, I mean, when you look further and you realise that the lintel is still fully attached to the cliff, I mean, it's still part of the cliff, and it's embedded into the massive rock at the ends, it's hard to imagine that even if we took the central columns away, that this thing would collapse.
There is compelling evidence to support this theory. The Khazneh was heavily restored in the 1960s. Before this, one of the central columns was missing. From 19th century paintings, the fallen column can clearly be seen. Even without it, the Khazneh remained intact. The columns are not load-bearing. The lintel, in fact the entire facade, is fully supported by the great cliff in which it sits. These discoveries show that the building of the Khazneh was no fluke. The Nabataeans knew what they wanted to do and how to do it.
They were conscious of absolutely every element before they built something like that.
The construction was meticulously planned and carefully managed.
That means there was a team of not only the carvers, not only the sculptors, not only the quarrymen, but also there was a supervisor. There was an architect who designed the main facade.
Through the architect's sleight of hand, the Nabataeans were able to create the appearance of a massive monumental structure for a fraction of the engineering risk and effort.
If you were to try and build a building on this scale and make it stand up, it would be prohibitive in technology and cost. And so this is a cheap and effective way of getting a fantastic effect.
The experts had established how the facade was built, but their investigation still had a long way to go. Questions remained about the interior of the Khazneh and what it was for. And the structure's inhospitable location posed problems with feeding and watering such a large workforce in desert temperatures of up to 50 degrees centigrade. But first, another, more pressing riddle lay before them. In spite of all their clever planning, the site the builders had chosen for the Khazneh seemed suicidal. The Siq, a narrow crack in the cliffs opposite, was cut into the rock by thousands of years of flood water surging along its path. It could flood suddenly and unpredictably, and the Khazneh and its builders lay right in its path. The Nabataeans chose the site of the Khazneh, the jewel of Petra, for maximum impact, directly opposite the Siq, the narrow twisting gorge that formed the entrance to the city. But they must have known that the Siq would not stay dry all year round. Rainfall is erratic in desert environments.
You can get a few inches or you can get a few feet, so it's totally unpredictable.
Charles Ortloff is a hydraulic engineer. He's been studying the water management in Petra's barren desert. In the wet season, between November and March, the rain is sometimes so heavy that the hard ground cannot soak up the water. Instead, it triggers destructive flash floods.
And it's not only the water, it's the debris it's carrying at that speed of the flash flood. That's very destructive.
The land around Petra is no exception.
In a heavy rainstorm, it's all funneled into the Siq.
The Siq is Petra's narrowest and longest gully. 100 meters in depth, 1.2 kilometers long, it was carved by centuries of flash flooding. During a heavy downpour, it was transformed into a raging torrent of water, 1.5 meters deep, heading straight for the Khazneh, endangering the delicately carved structure and its builders. But in 2002, researchers discovered a complex system of dams and a 30-meter tunnel excavated through the cliffs. The Nabataean builders had anticipated the danger. The tunnel was part of an elaborate plan to deal with the Siq's destructive floodwater. A dam diverted the torrents of floodwater through the tunnel to a nearby gorge, bypassing the Siq completely. It's an extraordinary achievement for engineers working 2,000 years ago. They literally held back the flood. But this wasn't just about protecting the Kazna. Recent archaeological work has made a dramatic breakthrough in the study of Petra. The tunnel is just one element of a vast water management system.
One of the biggest elements in the study of the Nabataeans now is the waterworks. It's the hydraulic engineering.
Its scale and sophistication make it one of the greatest feats of hydraulic engineering in the ancient world. And its efficiency was second to none.
Every drop is used in some way or another. So what you basically have would be a continuous water supply throughout the year. Absolutely perfect.
The discovery solved another riddle. How the Nabataeans kept their workforce supplied with a reliable source of water in the middle of the desert.
They understand the importance of preserving water, channeling water, and managing water. If you haven't got water in an area like Petra, you die.
The Nabataeans chose Petra's location carefully to ensure they could collect enough water for a constant supply.
Actually, Petra sits at the bottom of a basin, so it gets water from all angles coming into the central core of the city.
As well as collecting rainwater, the engineers harvested supplies from distant springs.
Offhand, I would say that every spring within a 15-mile radius of the core of Petra itself has been tapped.
Transporting water over such huge distances is a complex process. All the Nabataeans had were terracotta pipes. Short sections of pipe could be placed into rock-cut grooves, bedded in with mortar, and the joints sealed with watertight plaster. But there was a problem. While modern water systems use steel that can withstand huge internal pressures, terracotta is much weaker.
These pipes are relatively fragile, and if you pressurize them, it'll blow the joints apart.
The Nabataeans had to find a way to safely get water through the pipes. Their solution can be seen high up in the cliffs around the city.
They've got to have a system which doesn't generate significant internal pressures. And one such system is a constant grade system, where the water comes down steadily from end to end.
The constant gradient manages the forces within the pipes by controlling the flow of water. If the pipes are full, the flow of this water exerts huge pressure on the thin walls. However, if there's an air gap between the water and the walls, the pressure is dramatically reduced. This is called the open channel system.
The most efficient way to get fluid to the pipe is to have the pipe to a certain height.
This works best when the pipe is 80% full. Petra's water pipes were perfectly designed to achieve this flow. The Nabataeans got the maximum amount of water through their pipes with the minimum amount of risk. Over 2,000 years ago, these ancient people were specialists in hydraulic engineering.
They have mastered the hydraulic principles of flow in pipeline systems to a degree only matched in the 21st century.
It's one thing to collect rain in the wet season, but quite another challenge to source water during the dry months. The solution? Underground water storage.
There are 200 cisterns within the city.
The engineering genius of the terracotta pipes above ground is matched underground by this complex network of cisterns.
If you look at what's retained in the cisterns, you have several months' supply to sustain the large population.
What's more, the scale of the water system suggests a city with a population of 50,000 people and thousands of visiting traders. The city was like a man-made oasis in the desert.
It's a city of gardens, fountains, cisterns. Everywhere you look, there is a little bit of water cascading down from somewhere else.
It reflected the growing ambitions of its people. Monumental buildings were constructed in the city center. The great temples and shrines around the main thoroughfare, and the rock-cut theatre and magnificent royal tombs on the street of facades which leads down from the city's entrance and the Sikh.
One way of showing how important you are on the international scene is to create a city which eventually everybody remembered.
And the ultimate embodiment of the Nabataeans' success is the Khazneh.
Al Khazneh, with its lavish details, is an expression and display of the wealth and the power of the Nabataeans.
It lies right at the entrance to Petra.
It must have been put there to overall visitors to the city. Definitely it was showing off something.
But surely the Nabataeans didn't build this extraordinary monument just to impress visitors. What was the purpose of the Khazneh? The cliffs of Petra are pitted with rock-cut structures. Their function varied from tomb to temple to home. From the impressive scale of the Khazneh, it was clearly built for great things. The question is, what? The clues lie hidden in the sculpture. The grand facade is adorned with godlike mythical figures, animals and fronds and flowers. But these sit in stark contrast to the usual Nabataean decoration. Traditionally, Nabataeans used geometric designs and depicted their gods in the Arabian style, as rectangular blocks.
The gods of the early Nabataeans, 3rd, 4th centuries BC, are blocks of stone.
Far from simple blocks of stone, the sculptures on the facade have been identified as Amazons, great warrior women from Greek legend. The crown of Isis, the Egyptian goddess, has been discovered in the center, while just below it, the head of Medusa once stared down on visitors.
The Khazneh is the first, as far as we know, of the great facades which are full of images derived from other nations. It certainly is the greatest.
The Nabataeans gained more than just wealth from working the desert trade routes. As they traveled across the eastern Mediterranean, they gathered ideas, artistic styles, and beliefs.
The gods of the Nabataeans eventually change. They change appearance. They are no longer just blocks of stone. They look like Zeus, Isis, Aphrodite, the gods of all the nations that surrounds them.
And it is not just the decoration that reflects an adoption of Mediterranean styles. The whole facade mimics the architecture of the classical world.
I think that the monumentality, the influence of Egypt is definite there, but the influence of the Greco-Roman world is also present in the Khazneh.
It's easy to imagine how the Nabataeans gathered these ideas, but it's less obvious why they wanted to copy them. The answer is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago.
I mean, look at the clothes I'm wearing. I'm not wearing traditional Jordanian clothes, the cars we use, etc. And it was very, very similar at that time period when the Greco-Roman culture was a very dominant culture.
As the Nabataeans grew in wealth and knowledge, they adopted the fashions of their day. Now, through applying this adopted mythology, the stories hidden inside the sculpture can be unlocked, revealing vital clues about the great building's function.
You had the 4 eagles that were thought to take the soul of the dead up to heaven. At the sides, there are 6 figures of dancing Amazons with the double axe, and this is the death dance of the Amazons.
And the 2 figures at the base of the Khazneh are thought to be the Roman twins, Castor and Pollux, who guided people's souls to the underworld.
There's a very strong association with death in everything, almost everything we see here.
And there are other clues to the Khazneh being dedicated to the dead.
Right at the entrance here, you could see this basin with a hole and a channel leading out of it, and this would have been for offering sacrifices. So people of the public would come and see the beautiful facade, walk up, do their sacrifice, which could have been oil, precious oils, precious perfumes, maybe a small animal for the bloodletting here, and it would have gathered in a basin out there.
Offerings and sacrifices to the dead were an important part of the Nabataeans' beliefs. The evidence of death and ritual are tantalizing hints of the Khazneh's function, but they do not reveal the building's true purpose. It could still be a temple, a monument, or a tomb. Perhaps the final clues would lie inside. But after the glories of the facade, the interior of the Khazneh comes as a surprise. No great suite of rooms or elaborate decoration here, just a simple main chamber, 12 meters square, 13 meters high, with 2 side rooms at the front. The task of creating them without modern technology is almost unimaginable. The scene inside would have been horrendous, the air filled with choking dust.
The area inside is very confined, and the conditions there was very dark.
Only small oil lamps would have lit their way as they toiled into the heart of the cliff. Their tools for this task were just iron picks, chisels, and their bare hands. The chambers were carved using the same top-down technique as the outside facade. When the carvers reached the level below the great lintel, work started on the inner rooms. A tunnel was cut directly into the cliff and was widened to create the portico behind the columns. From this, further tunnels were cut to create the roofs of the chambers. The only clues to this clever technique are windows above the doorways, which served as the first tunnel entrances. Then, as work continued on the facade and its working platform dropped down the cliff, the floors of the chambers followed.
Approximately 5,000 to 6,000 blocks of stone were removed from inside Al Khazneh.
Quarrymen gouged out a staggering 6,000 cubic meters of rock from the chamber, the equivalent of 2 Olympic swimming pools filled with stone. It's an incredible achievement. But hard labor was not the only secret to their success. Despite its simplicity, the chamber required careful engineering. Above it lies the crushing force of more than 160 meters of solid rock.
You've got the great big lump that's sitting above you, the tens of meters of rock, all of which are weighing down on top of this hole, and their loads have to be transmitted somewhere. And what happens is that the loads will follow the stiffest path, effectively, and the loads push round the side of the cave and off down to the centre of the earth.
The problem comes if the chamber is made too wide.
The great big lump above would not be able to make its load journey all the way around the side, and it would push through in the middle and break through like that.
The Nabataeans clearly understood the limits of their design. They kept the interior chambers small enough to prevent a catastrophic roof collapse. But the simplicity of the interior space gave archaeologists no clues to the Khazneh's religious function.
There have been quite a lot of speculations about what this has been. was it a temple? But it does not have the correct divisions for a temple. Another one it's a tomb. But again, there are no signs of burials in there.
The interior has no trace of a burial, no sarcophagus, no plinth where one would have stood. Without any signs of a body, it could not be a tomb. Perhaps the Khazneh was a monument honoring a great king.
The Khazneh is such large scale, it must have been built by somebody extremely wealthy and powerful. It must have been the king. Which king? This is another question.
Archaeologists were only able to date the Khazneh to a rough 150-year window around the birth of Christ. And during this period, any of several Nabataean kings could have built the structure. With no further leads to follow, it seemed the Khazneh's true purpose would never be discovered. But then, archaeologists made a staggering breakthrough. In 1996, they found evidence that the ground level in front of the Khazneh was much lower in Nabataean times. It led one man on a journey of underground exploration to find what lies beneath and to unlock the Khazneh's last secret. Why the Nabataeans built the Khazneh has remained a mystery for centuries. Now, a groundbreaking new discovery has revealed crucial clues to its true purpose.
There have been discoveries and excavations, but nothing quite as important as this particular one.
These excavations add more information for this beautiful and unique monument in Petra.
Suleiman Farajat was director of the Petra Archaeological Park. Farajat knew that the paved surface of the Sikh, the winding gorge leading into Petra, disappears beneath the sand 300 meters before its end. He had a hunch. If the path continued its downward trajectory, it would reach the Khazneh well below its current ground level. There could be an entire hidden level of the Khazneh submerged beneath centuries of sand. So, in 2003, he started a major excavation. And his gamble soon paid off. 6 meters below the surface, he made a discovery. 4 burial chambers. Inside were the bones of 11 individuals.
So this is the fourth tomb we excavated, and we found a burial there, a burial of a man, and some hooks there for hanging the offerings like incense.
The Khazneh is more than just a monument. It is a mausoleum with a crypt beneath. But who was buried there? Are these the skeletons of the Khazneh's royal builder and his family? To identify the king, Farajat needed to date the burials.
All of the artifacts are dated to the first or the beginning of the 1st century AD.
With a date of the 1st century AD, finally the likely identity of the Khazneh's king is revealed.
I believe that Khazneh was carved out during the reign of Aretas IV.
Aretas IV was perhaps Petra's greatest and most successful ruler.
As we think that Khazneh was built by King Aretas IV, during whose time actually Nabataeans reached their height of power and riches.
Over 80% of all Nabataean coins found bear the image of Aretas IV, and it appears he put these riches to good use. Experts believe he was Petra's most enthusiastic developer. He is attributed with constructing the great temples and city streets. Now it seems he also built Petra's most elaborate structure as his family's mausoleum.
I think there was a famous person from the family of Aretas the fourth buried in one of these tombs.
Though the king himself is thought to be buried elsewhere, these underground tombs could contain the remains of his relatives lying beneath the Khazneh. Aretas was bestowed with the title Friend of his People. The Khazneh seems to have been greatly revered. Suleiman Farajat's excavations reveal that it lay at the heart of a thriving religious complex.
The fact that archaeologists have found bowls with incense and gifts to the gods all suggested that this is a place of worship.
The discoveries of altars and ritual offerings imply that this was a place of public celebration and pilgrimage. Now, all these discoveries are causing a complete rethink of Petra and the Nabataeans' place in history.
The perception of the Nabataeans has changed dramatically, even in the last 10 years.
They were much more than desert traders. They were accomplished architects, combining inspirations from other cultures with their own ingenious engineering. The Nabataeans created an incredible structure.
They are an extraordinary civilization. They're an extraordinary people.
And the Khazneh is their greatest achievement. It stands today, marking the golden age of a city carved from the desert rock by the sheer ingenuity of an ancient people. A people who have finally been restored to their rightful place in history. Today, thousands of visitors come to marvel at the undisputed crown jewel of Petra, lost city of the Nabataeans.